everybody, to another episode of the SPS DAOn Hall. I'll be your Clayboyn this evening, and I guess maybe this morning, depending on what side of the world you're on. But we'll be joined today by Dave McCoy and Yabapmatt, and who knows, maybe some other people will jump in at some point, but we'll just have to see how it goes. Today we're going to be discussing basically like the idea of transitioning the DAO or kind of like setting the DAO up for a new token distribution phase or something, basically some things that we have to start considering as we're leaving or kind of like coming up to the end of the white paper distribution phase. So, the DAO has to kind of learn how to become self-sufficient and create its own future, which is kind of exciting. But today we'll be joined by the original architect of the DAO, and we've got Dave here too to help discuss these options. So how you guys doing today?
I'm
Hey
doing
Clay,
great.
how's it going?
Cool. Yeah, I'm glad you guys were able to join us, and hopefully we'll get some good questions from the audience. I know there's probably a just a lot to break down and digest with I put out a post earlier today to kind of like I guess you could say like kind of help people kind of like ease their way into this topic. And I think it's probably still propagating like it's only been out for a few hours, but I am hopeful that like maybe over the next week or so we'll start to see more people you know getting involved there, giving feedback, kind of indicating like, is this a direction the DAO wants to explore? Is somebody going to come up with some better options? And that's something that like Matt and I have talked about is, a lot of times, it seems like people are like looking to like, like they'll look to me like, what's the answer? Or they'll look to Matt like, you got to have the answer for this. And it's very easy to say like what I personally think, or for like Matt to say like what he personally thinks. But at the end of the day, this is a DAO, and ultimately it's up to the DAO how we proceed. Like we can share ideas, we can try to like help guide, and like I can do some of the legwork for providing data and things like that. But ultimately at the end of the day, it's still going to be up to the DAO.
Yeah, you want me to like give an overview of the thought process behind, everything initially and how it was all set up and what's happening going forward?
Sure.
Yeah, so when it was started in July 2021, the SPS token was released and the white paper was released and the distribution began. The idea was that it was, 3 billion tokens that would be distributed over a 5-year period. So that would take us to roughly July of next year. Actually, I think it was 65 months, so maybe a little longer, but roughly 5 years. So it'd take us till July of next year. So there's about 12 months left um, on that distribution and the initial distribution plan of those 3 billion tokens. And the idea wasn't that, okay, after that it just ends and no one ever gets SPS tokens anymore. The idea was that over over time, the SPS DAO would be able to have its own sources of revenue and then be able to use that revenue in order to continue paying out rewards in the game, uh, or in other things potentially. Just continue to give out rewards going forward indefinitely in a sustainable way without continuing to inflate the SPS token supply. Um, so it's been over 4 years already, which is crazy to think about. And so Clay is, rightly starting to think about and plan for, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, however long. So he put out a post, which there's a link to in the town hall channel, um, kind of, restating the issue and putting forth what I think is a very reasonable solution. Um, and I think there's two parts to the solution. One is what he's talked about with exponential decay. So over the 5 years, there's been a lot of changes to things since the initial white paper. So there's been, certain reward pools that have been taken away or added or changed or reduced through DAO proposals over the years, which is great that the community works to, adjust things over time as things change. So even though initially the plan was that like all 3 billion tokens would have been printed and given out uh, by July 2026. Um, that's not the case. There's still some tokens available. The I think what Clay you were talking about was there's 200 million tokens still available from ending a lot of the liquidity rewards and things like that. So Clay's proposal is basically to take the tokens that are still available and give out a percentage of them split among all the different reward pools, or a percentage of the tokens remaining in the reward pools every month, and then so it'll slowly decrease and go down and down and down, which is how it works now. With the initially when these reward pools were created, there was a certain amount to start, and that was given out every month. And every month that decreased by, I think, 1%. So what Clay's proposing is a little different, but the same idea is that the amount, starts at a certain level and, just continues to decrease monthly. And then the second part of it, which, is not really talked about in Clay's post, but some people have asked about is then the DAO has revenue coming in, right? The DAO already has a bunch of revenue from pack sales and all the things that's done in the past. There's the mini set proposal that was just passed, so the DAO is going to have a bunch more revenue coming in. The DAO's going to have, a billion or so SPS tokens, and that was the whole idea is that once the SPS inflation period ends, and we're not printing more SPS tokens, then the DAO earns SPS tokens and pays a portion of those out. So, once if we decide to implement the exponential decay framework that Clay has proposed, um, then we can also say whenever the DAO gets revenue in or has extra SPS, there can be proposals to increase certain or all of the reward pools with that to push up the rewards for certain areas that the community feels like are worth incentivizing. So to me, it seems like a very good, clear, sustainable way to make sure there's SPS rewards on an ongoing basis. I guess that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, and I'll say this, like one of the things that, you know, I was kind of like thinking about is it's not like it's kind of like you're saying it's not all that different from what we're doing now. It's just like originally the initial distribution mechanism was designed to have an exponential decay where eventually you hit a point where you run out of tokens, right? So it's like the target that we were aiming for is somewhere beyond the actual supply. And what we're doing, or like basically like what I'm suggesting we should be doing is we should basically be think of it like almost like the exponential factor in like ranked rewards, right? Where like you can get, really close to a number, but you can't ever like really hit the top. But like basically we'd be looking at something like that where like over time you're going to constantly be draining this reward pool, but like the reward pool is never going to actually go to zero. So the way that this would work is that over time, like let's say we go with a, like a moderate curve, like something like a 2 or 3%, over time, rewards are gonna like start to drop off like a little bit every month, and it kind of like smooths out the longer it goes, right? Whereas if you do something very aggressive, like a 5%, you'll get a lot of rewards up front, and like it might be a really smooth transition. But what happens is after 2 years, you've used up like 75, 80% of your reward supply, and then your rewards are going to be very tiny going forward. So like one of the things that like I was trying to look at, and if you get to like the I guess the bottom area of my post, is I was kind of like trying to look at and explore. Okay, the DAO has roughly 200 million tokens that are kind of like left unallocated after we stopped the LP incentives. But then like if you also check like all the DAO's wallets, we're also sitting on like around 600 million liquid tokens, and these are not in like LPs. So like this is independent of what we have in LPs. if you like factor all this in together with what we have in LPs, the DAO's already sitting on about a billion SPS. Like I'd say 200 million of that is locked up into LPs, which is a good thing because that's generating revenue for the DAO. And we're also about to be doing this mini set, which I think should easily bring in 100 million SPS. I think that's like bare minimum what's going through my head whenever I look at that. But again, that's an assumption. It's not done until it's done. So basically, what I'm saying is like we have SPS to work with, and I think that's one of the big reasons why we need to start making decisions now. Because whenever we see a proposal like the one that was just put up for like the 25 million, because I was getting a lot of people asking, what are we gonna do? These rewards are gonna run out, and part of the problem is, that was like, in my opinion, it was a band-aid solution where we're gonna throw 25 million more tokens in the bucket and we don't have to deal with it for another 6 months. The problem is it's not very sustainable, right? Like we're gonna run out of tokens much quicker that way, and we don't permanently solve the problem. So like, in theory, we could constantly be trying to bring in more SPS than we put out, but whenever we're putting out, roughly 300 million a year, I think is like a rough estimate would be a good way to put it. And then if you look at like what we have left that's undistributed, there's only about 600 million left to like distribute from, outside of like the DAO's coffers. Then like we can tell, obviously some pulls in sooner, some pulls in later, but like roughly we have about 2 years worth of tokens before we have to start pulling tokens out of the DAO's holdings, right? And so if the DAO is only holding like, let's say we have roughly a billion tokens, right? And is the DAO going to have 3 years worth of rewards run away? Are we going to be doing a mini set every year to try to get us a fourth year? Like the point is, at some point we have to address and start thinking about what do we do to taper down rewards over a longer period of time, so that way we don't end up in these situations where we just run off a cliff, which is what people were kind of like messaging me about and like asking me like we need to do something, we need to do something. People are uncertain, they're going to start unstaking their SPS. And that's how we ended up with a proposal of like let's just throw 25 million SPS at the problem so we don't have to deal with it until later. But I will tell you guys, like as somebody that was trying to have this conversation, like over a year ago, and Dave was very involved in that too, is that the longer you put this off, you're gonna have a harder and harder time making the transition. Which is, I tried not to get too in the weeds in the post that I shared, but it does link to a spreadsheet. And if you go look at the spreadsheet, you can kind of see like the problem that we're already having is if you look at like ranked rewards, for example. If we try to transition to a model like this with ranked rewards, it's a huge drop off if we don't add more tokens into the bucket to kind of like smooth out the transition. But then if you look at a pool like land, or you look at a pool like brawls, right? Brawls actually has enough tokens that we could transition to a model like this and slowly taper them over time, and you actually get more rewards out the gate. Just because, Brawls is that well funded. And if you look at land, it's only like, 10 to 15%. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. It's definitely no more than 20. But like you would take like a smaller drop now to ensure you have rewards for a long time instead of just saying, let's give out all the rewards over the next 2 years. And then, you know, we're going to end up in a situation where you're going to have like the land people are going to say, give me some more SPS. And then, the ranked rewards people are going to be like, no, the SPS belongs here. Or the tournament people are going to say they want it there. And I feel like we're going to get into this situation where, people are all kind of like fighting for their own self interest, and the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be to make this transition. So that's why, personally, I voted no on the other proposal, and I think it's very important we have this conversation before it becomes too late. What do you think, Dave?
Dave, you're on mute if you're talking.
Yeah, sorry, I
There
kind
you
of
go. Thank
went
you.
on a rant there.
Yeah, no, you did good. I muted because I was getting all these little pingy noises in the background. I didn't want to interrupt you. Uh, but yeah, definitely sustainability is one of the most important things we can do. Um, I don't think people really understand how important it is, but it's huge, right? If if we are going to end rewards, let's say, like you were talking about the rewards for staking is going to end in whatever X amount of months, right? And then let's say we can't agree, right? Like we can't agree. That's going to make people nervous. So do they wait until there's 1 month left to act on that, or do they start now? You know, like it's just dumb to not solve a problem when you have a chance, right? It builds confidence. It adds credibility. You know, band-aids aren't a good solution. You know, essentially addressing issues, even if they're, you know, hard to do, right, is better than not doing, you know, not addressing it. So like you said, you know, we had talked about this and, you know, I had proposal out, not a proposal, but floating ideas around a year ago. You know, we're X amount lighter than we could have been if we would have done something like this last year. But you can't look back. What's important is look forward. I actually have looked at your plan last couple of days, just preparing for this call. I love it. You know, it's, you know, the numbers can move a little bit one way or the other based on what everybody thinks, but the general framework I think is fantastic.
Yeah, one thing I also, if I could say something, Clay, I you talk about like how people might want to do, you know, oh, they want more tokens for this or less tokens for that or whatever. I feel like there's two distinct things. One, and this is kind of what we're trying to focus on here, is we just need a general plan for the foreseeable future, right? We had initially a 5-year plan. I think it would be very prudent for the DAO to put in place a plan going forward for the next 5 years or more. That's what Clay is trying to do. Then it's and that's the whole exponential decay idea. So if that's put in place, then you don't have to worry. The rewards are set up; they can go on for basically an indefinite amount of time. Um, and then separately, the DAO is always able to decide to increase certain reward pools. So if the DAO, you know, has a bunch of tokens available, they make a bunch of revenue from pack sales or whatever it is, then the DAO can vote to say, you know, hey, we want to increase validator rewards, or you know, there's a lot of new players and we want them to get more rewards in modern and wild. There can be proposals to increase those pools. Those are kind of separate though from the general overall framework of how this works. So what Clay is trying to do is say, let's get a framework in place so we don't hit a wall and have problems because we run out of things. And then separately, once the framework is in place, we can decide where and how we allocate any revenues that the DAO wants to put in.
Yeah, and I would, go ahead, Clay, sorry.
I would say it's important to, like Matt's saying, get the framework in place so that we understand mechanically what it is we're working with. But then, you know, again, we're gonna have to get into the weeds a little bit of, you know, how do you want to allocate tokens? You know, whenever we do like a mini set pack sell and the DAO's bringing in SPS, you know, how do we want to dice that up? Like, what is the incentive for staking SPS to? I see Azure Khan's in the other channel, and he was, you know, asking about like what is the incentive for staking SPS, and you know, like that's the thing, right? Like we kind of have to determine this as a DAO, where currently you stake SPS, you get, you know, staking rewards, you can play in battles, you can play in tournaments, and you can earn SPS for all of this, right? And you know, like one of the other options is because, you know, like I'm not like so rigid in like the mentality that like everything has to be one way, right? Because like, you know, some people may say, or you know, like the DAO may determine we want to get rid of staking rewards. And you know, at that point, I would say, okay, well then, you know, do we have enough incentive to encourage staking rewards? You know, is just like your access to tournaments or is your ability to play ranked play and you know, earn glint, you know, stuff like that. Like, is this enough incentive? And I think there's a good
And
chance
vote on
people.
proposals.
Well, right, yeah. It's
That's the
like
main
I
thing.
think that, you know, we're going to get into a point where people start, you know, looking more at the monetary incentive, and you know, like, is there a chance that we can make vouchers valuable enough? Possibly. And I did briefly see people float around the idea of making yet another token, and I'll tell you guys, I really, really don't want to see that happen. But like that's the main thing that we have to do here is like if we can agree on a framework or like mechanically how are we going to handle this, then going forward we have a lot more flexibility to say, okay, well, ranked rewards are getting a little low. I don't feel like people are as incentivized to play ranked. Maybe we need to add some more tokens to that bucket. And then at that point, maybe we have a mini set sell. Maybe we bring in 100 million tokens and we say we're going to put, 50 million in ranked. We're going to put another 10 million in tournaments. But basically we have to build the incentives we want to encourage. But to even get to that part of the conversation, we have to mechanically understand what we're doing, because what we're doing right now is not going to really be sustainable long term unless we can find a way to start bringing in more than 300 million SPS every year. And trying to bring in more than you're putting out every year is going to be a problem. And then also, there's the other problem of if we run out of rewards, you now run off a cliff. And then, like, what are we doing as we approach that cliff? Are people saying, "Oh man, the ranked rewards are ending in a month. I better go ahead and unstake my SPS so I can sell it now, and not wait until I can't do the thing I want to do with it." And like that's the main reason why I think it's very important that we have these conversations now. And again, maybe somebody in the DAO comes up with a better option and they want to pitch it to the DAO, and that's what the DAO chooses to go with. Like, I'm fine with that. Like, I think the goal should be we find the best option. The problem is I don't see anybody putting up a better option at this point, and I really do. Like, I encourage if somebody feels that this is not a good way to proceed, please help us find the best way to proceed. And if ultimately the DAO does determine that we just want to run out of tokens and figure it out from there, well, I can tell you the DAO has like $1.5 million worth of deck. It's sitting on 600 million liquid SPS. I mean, we have some options to work with, but again, like all of these things are going to have to be sustainably managed just to like ensure that we don't run off a cliff at some point, because running off that cliff is going to remove a lot of incentive from people to do the behaviors that we want them to do, like staking SPS, for example.
Yeah, there. If can, are you good? Can I speak, Clay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, Gathering the Magic made a good point. Like rewards other than SPS, the harder SPS is to gain, the more its value desirability will increase. That's actually an excellent point and something that I've been saying for a while. Like we should be trying to figure out, how to increase things that people want to do, whether it's things they buy, whether it's things they earn with SPS. And we are doing that, right? We are focused on that. I don't think that the creating an SPSB token, like Nachos said, is the right solution. Like the SPS token is a governance token. So going back to AZ's question, it's a governance token. If you own that token, you get stake in the system. Like you get to say, I agree or don't agree with whatever proposal comes out. And if you have a very, very little stake, you don't really get a huge voice. And if you have a very large stake, you definitely get a huge voice. So there is a massive utility for owning SPS. And there is a value. And as we get bigger as a game and stronger and more people attached to it, like imagine if we had the ability to govern Bitcoin, for instance, like it would be huge, right? Like those tokens would be very valuable. So it's the same concept with us. You don't need a second governance token. You only need one, right? But there are other things that we can do. And yeah, if we can figure out how to uh, manage the SPS that's given out by replacing it through things like the mini set, where we get 100 or 150 million or however many we get, and that just extends our longevity of earnings, then what's going to happen is it's going to create a situation where SPS is effectively getting bought back. So it's taken from the weaker holders and given back out as prizes, which effectively, if you do that enough times, it's going to definitely have an upward effect on the price over time because there's going to be people like the Brave tofus that are, going to go from 60 million to 70 million at some point. So, having that sustainable system so that prizes, I mean, that's our most valuable prize that we can give out at this time, is the SPS. So, protecting it is important.
I do feel like we've kind of covered the basics, and I see we've got at least one hand raised. I think Azarcon's wanting to come on, so let me get him in here and see maybe he has some questions we can address. But yeah, like you guys listening, like if you have questions, like I'm watching the YouTube chat, I'm watching the town hall chat. So feel free to drop your questions in there. If you feel like really passionate about getting on the mic, raise your hand. I'll try to get you on. Um, with that said, okay, I invited you to speak, Azarcon, so you should be able to join us now. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you, but can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for setting this up, Clay. So, one of the things that I want to talk about is, and I'll try to be short, is the comment that both Matt and Dave made. You know, people who are holding SPS for a long time, we understand the governance bit of it, right? I'm sure Brave understands. I understand. I know that I do. But there are a lot of other people holding SPS for a 5 to 7% SPS return or whatever the current return is. Now, for me, that is not an incentive. I am holding SPS for the governance, and so is Brave. But when you remove the incentive, then those people who are holding 200,000 SPS, 100,000 SPS for a 5% ROI, you can argue whether that is an incentive enough or not for me or for Brave or for other people. They are doing it for that incentive. So you have to at least acknowledge that and address that problem. So I downvoted the current proposal. You know that. So I want all of us to get back to the drawing board and figure this taper out or whatever it is out. I like Matt's idea about, you know, kind of set up the boundary condition first as a discussion, like what is the governance pattern is going to be with the token, and then kind of do individual pieces at a time. So that's all I'm saying. So please think about people with 100,000 staked XPS or 200,000 staked XPS.
I'm not sure I follow. Are you saying for people with smaller amounts of staked SPS that you want to make sure there is a staking reward pool?
Yes, that's all I'm saying. They are currently and they are currently only staking, well, the part that is required to play the game, there is a requirement to play the game, so that big. Plus anything additional they're staking for an ROI. And that ROI comes from the staking rewards that we get.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood. I agree. I mean, I didn't really participate in any of the discussions about the staking reward pool, but as far as I was concerned, that was a good reward pool to have, assuming the community agreed. So yeah, I guess I'm on the same page as you on that one, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's it. And so, whatever taper we design, therefore, it will be some kind of an exponential taper. That's what we are discussing right now. So, at some point in time, there will be a tipping point where the staking rewards for individuals are going to be low enough that they would consider that, well, why do I want to keep my SPS stake? So it is our responsibility from the DAO and as joint shareholder to come up with a solution. And it doesn't have to be more SPS. It can be something else. It can be some other incentive in the game that can compensate for that lack of SPS reward, whatever that paper we design, right? So it is going to be less compared to whatever it is now. So
Yeah,
we
no.
need to,
Well, as a
Yeah,
kind
go
of, I
ahead.
would say
yeah.
you can actually approach this from like multiple points, right? Like let's say if we wanted to go with a more aggressive curve, like we're gonna go with like a 1 or 2%. Like short term, this is gonna hurt. Like SPS is gonna like the SPS emissions are gonna shrink drastically, right? Like I mean, we're talking about like
Yes.
maybe 25 to 30% of what we're currently giving out. That said, like if you wanted to do something like that and combine it with additional incentives that encourage staking, and this is kind of like one of the things I was touching on that previous proposal, is we could be encouraging staking with things like having a more robust voucher shop, right? Or you
Yes.
know, like there's other ways to encourage that staking to get more benefits, right? Like maybe yeah, you know, I don't want to get like too hypothetical here, but I mean, I could imagine a lot of ways you could say, you know, convert your staking of SPS into actual tangible stuff, you know, like maybe NFTs, things like that. And it doesn't always have to be tokens. What I'm saying is, if we don't come up with a plan or we don't make some kind of transition to a different distribution model, we're gonna run off a cliff and we basically have a deadline. Like, and I'm not saying what I'm about to say to like scare people, but like you really need to
No,
understand that
Clay,
we have like 10
Clay,
months of
we have
staking
covered that.
rewards. Do what?
Clay, we have covered that. People understand that. The falling off of the cliff scenario is understood. So we don't need to repeat them. So the point is, as opposed to devising new things, your voucher idea is a fine one. Okay, that is already existing. We just have to make the store or keep product in the store that make vouchers valuable, right? That we can do that. That is not hard. We have already done some, but we got to do this pretty quickly now, and have to come up with a plan and with a solution within a period of, let's say, 1 month. If we want to change the paper in 1 month, whatever this other voucher store plan is, that also needs to come up in 1 month.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying is like basically we are on a limited timeline at this point to start making decisions. And that's again, that's one of the reasons why, you know, we didn't want to support. I feel like you and I both didn't really want to support that the previous proposal. Is basically what we're doing. If we pass that, we're basically saying we're just going to not worry about this for another 6 to 8 months, and then we're going to be right back in the same problem with just less resources to work with to solve it. And let's see.
Yes.
So Dave wants me to
So
explain this chart. Okay, so Dave, this chart, well, actually, this is not going to be fully accurate now because I was kind of like looking and assuming that the 25 million was going into the staking based on the way that proposal was working. So it's really more like 45 million in staking. But what I was presenting here is like if we like added up or we added additional tokens to these pools, and then we look at like let's say what a 3% decay model looks like. That would be so like if it's with staking, let's say we add 70 million tokens to the staking rewards pool and we go on a 3% exponential decay, we would be moving to about 3.45 million SPS a month right now, and then it would be dropping over time. Which, you know, if you look at that post, you can find the linked spreadsheet, and you can actually see this broken down of like, what does this look like next month? What does this look like the month after that? And then what I put next to it is the current rewards distribution, right? So right now we're having about 4.6 million tokens a month that are rewarded for staking. So to get to a point where we're only having like 3.45 million, you know, we would still have to add 70 million tokens. That's about a, you know, that's 75% of what we were giving out, but it ensures that we have tokens for the longevity instead of the fact that we're going to run out in 10 months, right? So what I tried to do is go look at each pool and try to make sure that nobody was getting more than like staking is the one that's going to get hit the worst, but like we just, we're acting so late on staking that we're literally talking about 70 million tokens just to pad it up to a 25% haircut. If you look at licenses, putting 10 million there keeps it kind of close to where it's at. Lands would be taking like a 14% haircut to move to an exponential decline model. An infinite exponential decline model. Brawls actually are so well funded, you get like an extra 50% out the gate, which is kind of crazy. But again, like this is like a benefit of moving early. Then if you look at like the top validator rewards, it's actually a slight bump in the short term. But yeah, so basically it's kind of showing you like if we, hypothetically went with this plan of like using the 200 million unallocated tokens in this way, this is kind of like the percent change in rewards you could expect out the gate. And then if you, go through the spreadsheet and kind of like look at the charts, you can see what does this look like over the next 10 years. And, of course, we can always add more tokens into these pools over time. Maybe every year we do a mini set and we have like another 100 million or so that it's split up into these pools. But to get them to somewhere where I feel like people may be, at least willing to like accept and agree to a transition, that's kind of like what the exercise in this chart was, Dave, just to, kind of give people an idea of what we're talking about there.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I wanted you to explain it, because some of the variables in this chart can be changed. So for instance, you just said, hey, what if we take the 195 million, which I guess you rounded up to 200 million tokens that we saved from liquidity pools and reallocated it, right? To kind of shore up the ones that, had paid out early, so to speak, or paid out earlier than others. And the other variable that I see in there is the 3% decay. That could be 1% decay. That could be 2% decay. It could be 5% decay. It could be anything that the DAO wants. You kind of took it and said, here's what Clay thinks. Right? This is like Clay's mentality of what he thinks is a relatively smooth transition. Right? Like we're gonna put money in the things that need shoring up, kind of put everything on a somewhat solid basis, have a 3% decay, which basically means, we're paying out, 40% of the reward pool each year, or 35% of the reward pool each year, which, by itself would extend it for 3 years. But because of the nature of a decay, it would turn out to be like 4 or 5 years. And at least that puts us on a path going forward. If somebody in the community says, I want to do 1% because we got to take our medicine now, that's that's you know something that can be debated. We could go to 5% and like pay it all out now, and or a big chunk of it now, and have very little left next year. So all that stuff is in the weeds on your post, but I want everybody to know that, whether we add 70 million to staking, or 10 million to licenses, or 15 million to 50 million to modern or wild, like that's kind of a community decision. You're just giving them the framework, right? So that's where, we as a community have to get together. And like Matt said, I'm also a DAO holder, because I own SPS, or a DAO participant. So I have my own thoughts on these numbers, but generally, I love the concept. I think it's great, and hopefully, there's going to be some people that are going to just say, just let them run out, and that's fine. They're going to be no on anything, right? But the guys like what AZ was just saying, like we can't, we have to make sure that there's rewards for staking, for instance. Like even if they're reduced, it's better than nothing, right? So we're now at that point where we can make these decisions, and yeah, there's going to be a little bit of reduction on certain things, but it's a manageable reduction. And by the way, on the positive side of this, there's going to be less SPS going out because we just don't have it to give out forever, right? Like we just can't sustain the amount we're giving out today each and every year forever, right? It has to have some kind of halving type effect, which is exactly what makes Bitcoin so valuable. So I'm really excited about this, to be quite honest. And like you said, we were looking at it a year ago. Um, you know, I'm thrilled if we get this done. So hopefully sooner, just like AZ just mentioned. I much rather get this addressed in the next few weeks than the next 2 years. 2 years would be too late. I'll go back to mute.
Yeah, my whole thinking. So sorry, it's hard to to not talk over everybody. But one thing I generally think with the whole thing is that I think a lot of people get really caught up in every little detail of everything and the exact numbers of everything. In the sense that I think there's this thought process that if we somehow get these numbers to exactly some right level, all of a sudden, like everything's going to take off and it's going to be amazing. Um, to me, I look at it differently. I just think, any of these things will be fine. Like it doesn't matter. It's, if the land bucket is reduced a little or this is increased, whatever, all these things. I just think it's really important that something is in place, right? The exact details matter less. Things change so fast that whatever we decide now is the exact right thing is probably going to be different in 3 or 6 months or anyway. So to me, and this is generally my thinking, overall, the main thing is that we have a good product that people like. So obviously that's, pretty much the main thing that the team is doing our best to focus on with the help of the DAO is get as many more people in here as we can and build a cool product that people like to play and to participate in and to put money in. And then, assuming we can do that, um, all these little details and how much exactly goes where, to me, those are not like make or break things. So I think it's important, and I think it's one of the DAO's, main jobs is to figure out the rewards and what we want to do, where and how. But the main thing for right now is, in my opinion, not to get too focused on that and just make sure we have a clear plan going forward, because it will be a big problem if all the rewards just stop because no one could agree on anything. So I think it's more important that we just go forward with something. I think Clay has a very clear, well thought out plan, and barring anything better, I would 100% support it. And then after that, it's not like all this stuff is set in stone. After that, we can say, okay, well, the community thinks that we're paying out too many staking rewards, or the community thinks we need to incentivize modern and wild more. Whatever it is, all that stuff can be done. It can be changed. It could be changed many times as the situation changes in the future. But I just want to be clear that the discussion now and the high priority thing now is just to get a plan in place for the next 5+ years. And that's, so I appreciate you doing that, Clay. I think you, as usual, go above and beyond your duties as DAO manager when you do all this stuff.
I mean, I think it's pretty mission critical, just like, I think that, by the very nature of my job, I have a lot more time to, work on this stuff on the DAO's behalf. And as much as, I'm a big advocate for getting the community more involved in stuff, right? Like, I would love to see the community going out and putting out proposals. And, I would love to see just more of this, I don't think that like I'm perfect and I have all the answers, but I do feel like I have enough time to like research, and that's one of the things I do is I'll talk about this stuff and then I'll research and challenge my own ideas and just try to find better ways to do things. And like one of the things that I found interesting is I was talking about a percentage based distribution model, right? And then like Azurcon messages me and he's like, you need to look at exponential decay, and I'm like, well, we're literally talking about the same thing, we're just using different words, right? And it was it's kind of similar because like I know Dave had a similar idea to this because he and I were kind of going back and forth about a year ago, before he got into his position, and we were trying to kind of like figure out this problem. And one of the philosophies Dave had about it is that you have to kind of like have an overall picture instead of just a like individual basis, which is one of the things that I was trying to focus on after dealing with the whole tournament rework situation and seeing just how much kind of infighting and disagreement a lot of these decisions can build up, is that I was thinking we have to figure out how to address each particular bucket, whereas Dave was like, nope, you need like a full solution. And you know what? I think like over time, I more agree with him. And this is kind of what I was touching on earlier. And that's why I kind of put together a mock up of, like assuming we did this, this is how I could personally see it playing out, right? It's not like I'm telling you we have to put 70 million tokens in the staking bucket. I'm basically saying like I feel like this would be a smooth enough transition that most people could handle it, and then it buys us time to do things kind of like what Azurkan's talking about there about like what are the other incentives, like maybe you get an easier unlock on your rewards cards for having 500,000 SPS staked, or maybe you get some kind of new incentives. Maybe you get skins. I can't tell you what the answer is, but I think we do have the tools and we do have a good team here to help shore up those incentives, whether those are with your reward cards, whether those are with like skins, whether those are with special promo voucher cards. We have a lot of tools we can work with, but I do think kind of like what Matt's saying here, the core problem we have to face right now is we have to answer a question. Do you want to extend SPS rewards indefinitely, or do you want them to run out? Right? And again, that's ultimately it's going to be up to the DAO. The DAO may say we just want to let them run out. And my main point of this whole conversation, like why we're doing this right now, is okay. And then what do you want to do from there? Because these are the questions the DAO has to be able to answer for itself.
So Clay, just to try and address your last point, I think community have already answered that, right? We do not want the rewards to run out because the pre-proposal has failed, right? You wrote the pre-proposal such a way that you essentially reallocated that and to extend it a little bit more, and that has failed. So essentially the answer to that is no, we do not want them to run out. We want to make a plan, which is your plan, which is what we're talking about. So I think that question is answered.
So what do you think? Have you had a chance to look over the post, Azurkan?
Yeah, I have, and it's a as a post. I have no problem with that. I think what I am more worried about is the part where we don't have total control and we have to talk to the team. If we want to incentivize using voucher shop, then we want to talk to the team and have to find out what that incentive is and how long would that take. If it is a new card, that's we already have a new card. So that to me is nothing new. If it is skin, and people have talked about skin for a long time, and there is an issue with that, and I don't exactly know what the issue is. The question is, if it is 2 months' time, we want to make that change. Can we come up? If skin is an answer, can we come up with skins in 2 months' time? We got to be specific here. So that's what I'm trying to get at.
AZ, can I, first of all, yes, the DAO can always communicate with the team for sure. Um, when you say we need an answer on that, are you saying in lieu, like if we pass this proposal, we still need an answer, or whether we have an answer will depend on whether we pass this proposal? If that makes
No, I
sense.
mean we have to write this proposal. Whatever the solution is, we have two tasks at hand. First of all, what Matt pointed out, like we need a boundary condition for the government, right? An overall package that extends our vision for the next 5 years. So that's one. We can do that. That is not really a proposal, but we can discuss it and we can come up with it. So that's one. But after we do that, we actually have to come up with a proposal, whatever that proposal is, so that the SPS rewards do not run out of the cliff, right? Which is this taper, whatever taper that we are talking about. So when we introduce that proposal, the staking rewards will reduce by some amount, and we can discuss what amount. At that point in time, if we want to supplement it with voucher store rewards, that's where the discussion with the team comes in. At that time of the proposal, we have to say that what we are going to do. So are we ready for them? That's my question.
Gotcha. I um I see your point is, hey, let's say we pass this proposal and everything in the proposal happens and there's going to be some drop off on various areas. Is there things that the team can do to mitigate that in some way, shape, or form? Right. For instance, so if staking rewards are going to drop by 25%, for instance, can we give them better value for their vouchers, for instance, by making a couple extra cards? That's essentially your point? Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes, that
Okay.
is my point.
It's
And it doesn't have to be card. It can be something else. It can be
right.
somewhere else.
Right. I'll give you some alpha. We are working on skins, so uh, independent of this proposal. So
Right.
yes, we're working on things. Right. I don't know if it should be muddied into the proposal itself, though, because essentially my philosophy and Matt's philosophy, I believe Matt can speak for himself, but I believe like if the DAO wants us to do something, we're gonna do it. So if you guys said, "Hey, could you give us something to, something that we create for stakers, like a staking card of some kind, like a cool card or a cool skin or whatever the case may be," like sure, that would be like if the DAO wants that, like if you guys can get people to vote for that, and it happens, then sure, I'm all about using the ability of the team to drive value to this SPS token, which is exactly what you're just saying. Matt, do you agree that if the DAO wanted something like that, we would support that?
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, we're already kind of doing that stuff anyway. Um, like you mentioned, and also we're planning to, add SPS staking benefits into the new reward card set and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, that's of course we always work with the community and the DAO in any way that we can. It is important to keep in mind, like we do have not that many people on the team, and so everyone kind of needs to keep in mind uh, anything we do decide to do or the DAO asks us to do will come at the expense of some other project. So it's really important to prioritize, what's the most important thing for the ecosystem. My general feeling is that what I said earlier, we need to, make as good and engaging a product as possible to get as many people in here and playing and putting money into the ecosystem as possible. Um, Even if it's not into SPS directly, it will benefit SPS and all the stakeholders if just more people are coming in and playing and buying cards and stuff like that. Obviously, because all the cards come, the money goes to the DAO, or at least a portion of it. So yeah, so uh, if we are whenever we can, we're trying to put in benefits for staking and all that type of stuff, while trying to be cognizant of there's a lot of like gamers out there who may not be interested in SPS staking. So we want to make the SPS staking benefits cool and additional, but not like required, in order to play or have a good time in the game. So there's a balance there. But yeah, I mean, we're the overall always open to ideas and things from the community, especially that come with a past proposal to kind of prove that they're, something that the community generally agrees on. It's just important to make sure that it's, really something we want to focus our limited resources on.
Guys, I want to be respectful of your all time too, because I know we're coming up on an hour. But there's two questions I wanted to get to that I saw from the audience. Weagle was asking about like instead of burning SPS for deck, why doesn't the DAO just buy the SPS back and put out the deck? Um, I mean, in theory, like you could kind of say that's what we're doing with the mini set, but again, like if that's something that you want to put out there as a proposal for the DAO to, basically have SPS buybacks with deck instead of the burn mechanism, you could put the proposal out there and see if people have any interest in it. I don't really know. But again, like I don't want to get too lost into a side tangent here, but that is something that could tie in with the rewards. So yeah, like I said, I would advise you to explore that. And then I saw one from Beehiver that was asking about using a KE ratio to incentivize long-term investing and holding of SPS. And my response to you would be that that's, I've tried to explain what I think like the core functionality of vouchers is to people before, which vouchers are really a representation of essentially like the time you have staked SPS, right? Like vouchers are already kind of that mechanic. Like they are the thing you get that says I was staking for this amount of time. Like besides just your obvious, SPS rewards you get for staking. Um, I think that's the thing is we need to just add more utility to vouchers, and maybe like one card at a time's not enough. Maybe I think kind of like what Dave was saying there. Maybe we need two out, or maybe we need two voucher cards and we need like a couple of voucher skins, and maybe we have rotations every few months. I mean things like that. Like we can always find ways to create syncs that I think are you know viable. Like I mean I don't think it would be like a massive amount of work for the team to put out one more voucher card at a time, or maybe have them run for half as much time. Basically what I'm saying is like we have tools at our disposal to address that problem. I don't know if you'd want to like try to go rework the whole algorithm, as that's a lot of development work. But again, like just like I was telling with Weeko there, like if you want to go explore your idea with the DAO, flesh it out, and turn it into something actionable, maybe people will agree with you, and maybe I'm wrong here, but yeah, that would be my advice is if you want to explore these like alternative options, you should be like doing so with the greater community and just kind of like bouncing ideas off, see what sticks. That's my strong suggestion.
Yes, and Clay, if I may say so, I agree with you. I think I created K ratio, so that is a high thing. I do not want to muddle that with Splinterland. Voucher is the product that we get as an incentive to stake SPS. So I 100% agree with you. It needs to be based on voucher because that is already existing. And I also agree with Matt. I do not want to burden the team with additional work. We need to be mindful of their time and resources. We have very limited resources available. So we'll make do with what we have, with the least amount of work from the team.
Yeah, and that's yeah. I think things like cards, stuff like that. If it's stuff that they're already doing, it's very easy just to like add one more in. It's whenever you talk about like fundamentally like reworking the entire like algorithm, it's just that's a pretty big burden to just kind of like ask to randomly put on the team. Like I mean that's the kind of thing I imagine we would have to pay for, and then there would be like a lengthy development time, and yeah, like that would be very complicated. Is all I'm saying. So Dave, what do you think? Like, as far as like Azarcon's idea of like maybe adding some more voucher utility. I mean, like to me, that seems like we could very minimally, do something like that. Like, I don't know how many of you guys know, but like I do tend to work with the team. Like whenever we're doing things like releasing new sets, I work with like Royal and Blaze whenever we're trying to test out these voucher cards or promo cards, and like one of the things like you may see with the pickle, the pickle is like the first time I really pushed for something, and I know Matt was super excited to have everybody pulling his pickle every day, and
My wife still talks about how weird that is.
my favorite screenshot was the one where it said you pulled your own pickle. And like everybody was talking about it. But it's funny because it's just like everybody was so excited about your Roni, and like everybody, I remember before the Ronis came out, everybody was like, "Man, I want the pickle Roni, I want the pickle Roni," right? And then we mint the Ronis, and there's only two, and everybody was like, "Wow," because like everybody wanted a pickle Roni, and now like nobody can have one. So like my thoughts were like, why don't we recapture some of that magic, and people can get their pickle, even if it's not like get a Rooney, right? So I think that like there's things like that we can do. I may regret what I'm about to say, but there seems to be a lot of people in the community that want a beaver card, Dave. Maybe you've heard about this.
Yeah, I actually have. So, yeah, that's something we're working on as well. And the answer about the vouchers part of it, you know, like making more things that can be purchasable in vouchers. Like I love the idea. I'm 100% excited about it. I want to make vouchers, have value as well. So if you notice, we've done things like the auctions that we've done that are for the voucher cards, and that's kind of a cool fun way to do it. Those consume vouchers to participate. The actual purchase of them, the cards themselves require vouchers. We got a new one coming up here, I think a week from Tuesday, if assuming no problems come out. That's going to be as Blaze would call it, a banger. So yeah, I mean, I love the voucher mechanic. I think that can certainly pick up some of the slack, on something like this. And by the way, that can happen, to many different areas. Like people in rank play are always, one thing I've learned, from Splinterlands in total over 7 years is many people look at the game the way they play it. Right? Like if they're just a gamer and that's all they do is game, and all they care about is making sure they have all the cards, right? And then if they're a collector, they want to have the higher value cards or the rarer cards. If they're a ROI guy, they want to make sure the ROI is there, and Splinterlands is many games, and I view our job as doing what we can to produce value, right? And then once we produce value, for instance, skins, you're going to see skins out relatively soon, and that's going to create value that's going to go somewhere. So whatever we decide to price them in, if we price them in vouchers or deck or SPS or land, items. I mean, whatever we decide to price it in, that's where that value will transition to. But by us creating things that people want, that's where we're doing our job. So I'm happy to work with the DAO. Like Matt said, obviously, I don't, I think it's a great relationship. I think the DAO is respectful of, not asking us to do more than we can do. But the answer is yes. I think we can create a lot more things, and we are going to. So,
Well, I know you guys both probably have meetings and things to get to, so we can probably start trying to wrap up. Do you guys have any other closing thoughts or anything you wanted to touch on before we do that?
I'll go first just to let Matt wrap it up on his end. But I like it so much without any further discussion, meaning like I don't need to be convinced of anything further. I would vote for it today if you put that out as a proposal. Like I think it's that important. I don't particularly worry about what, like Matt said, you know, whether it should be 60 million here instead of 70 million or 52 million instead of 50 million. Like that part doesn't really matter to me. Just the concept itself would be something I would vote for. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I think I mentioned that a bunch of times. It's really important that the DAO gets something in place, in my opinion, for the foreseeable future. And then we can details of how much goes into what pools can be figured out later, and that'll change over time. But just having a framework is important. And then aside from that particular issue, like I said, overall, I think it's important that everyone, as a stakeholder, Dave, you mentioned that people look at things about how they play the game, which is true and makes sense. I think it's important that as a stakeholder, you're different than a player. You're more like an owner of the game. I mean, you are an owner of the DAO. So it's important to look at not just how you yourself participate in the game, but what's best for the game, best for everything overall, which includes all different players who participate in all different ways. So it's a different mindset, going from player to owner, and having all of you effectively have two roles in the ecosystem. Um, you're one side a player and the other side an owner. And I think it's important that more of the players start to look at it from that perspective too.
I think that's solid advice. And I'll basically like this weekend I'll probably gather feedback. I have the post out. Let's kind of like get an overall feel. I'm gonna share the video. I'll add it to the post too, just to kind of like help us get more feedback and see what people are thinking. If in general people are supportive of that plan that I put together, I will run a proposal for it. And again, guys, I want to be clear on something. Like, even if we did hypothetically do just exactly what I said, keep in mind the DAO still has 600 million SPS, just like Liquid, sitting in DAO wallets right now. That if we wanted to like supplement other pools or we wanted to do other things in the future, like we have more resources to do it. My main point, again, just in closing, is we need to do something now that is effective that I think most people can tolerate, and then we have more room to breathe and work going forward. So, hopefully, if nothing else, this sparks some good discussion and it helps the DAO kind of like chart its course forward. And that's, to me, that's the most important thing, is that we make a decision while we still can, just so we don't have a decision made for us. So I think, thanks all of you for joining today. Thanks for Dave, Matt, Asder Khan coming in, sharing your thoughts. And, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.